Hello, I want to welcome you this evening. My name is Ann Helmreich, and I'm the director of the Baker Nord Center for the Humanities. And it's my pleasure to provide the introduction to our evening. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the Friends of the Baker Nord Center for all their support. The Humanities Center is in the midst of a challenge campaign, and so this is quite meaningful for us to have the community behind us. And having you all here tonight underscores the significance of the humanities. Before I forget, can I ask you to either turn off or silence your cell phones? And I'm notorious for always forgetting to do this. Tonight's lecture is our annual Richard N. Campen Lecture in Architecture and Sculpture. Richard Campen was an important contributor to our understanding of architecture in Ohio. He authored numerous books, including Ohio, an Architectural Portrait, Outdoor Sculpture in Ohio, and Architecture of the Western Reserve. And his walking tour of downtown Cleveland, which he prepared for a meeting of architectural historians, is still considered an essential resource for appreciating Cleveland architecture. I also want to add that we're delighted that members of the Campen family could be with us this evening, and I'd like to recognize them at this moment. Richard Campen, his wife Margareta, and Richard's brother Selden Campen's family is represented by Peter Campen, his wife. May you take the moment to thank them for coming. I think it's particularly appropriate that we're able to honor Richard Campen's legacy by hosting tonight's lecture, which is given by one of our local heroes in architecture, Pete Van Dijk. So I think this wonderful connection between somebody who studied the history of Ohio architecture and someone who's changed Ohio architecture. I'm also particularly delighted because this year our Humanities Center is focusing on the theme of globalism, and Peter Van Dijk's career exemplifies this theme. He was born in Indonesia to Dutch parents. He grew up in Venezuela, and I understand that your knowledge of Spanish came in handy when you were working alongside Cesar Pelli in Aaron Saarinen's studio. Is that correct? He earned his undergraduate degree at the University of Oregon, served in the Army, and then earned his master's degree in architecture at MIT with the GI Bill. His first job was with the firm of Saarinen, and his work including supporting the design process for Dulles Airport. And today he's returned to that site to oversee the architectural integration of the new transit station into the terminal. In the intervening years, and I'm obviously truncating an extraordinarily rich record of accomplishment, Peter Van Dijk has lived in Rome on a Fulbright Fellowship and received numerous architectural awards, including the American Institute of Architects Gold Medal, the Cleveland Arts Prize, and the Ohio Arts Prize. He was the lead architect in the firm now known as Westlake Reed Liskowski. Our local landscape has been enriched by his designs, which include Blossom Music Center, Kane Park Amphitheater, and buildings for Cleveland State, Ursuline College, and John Carroll University, just to name a few. He's also been a leader in preservation, including the Cleveland Federal Reserve Bank, the transformation of the Akron Post Office into the Akron Art Museum, and the restoration of the Palace State and Ohio theaters in Cleveland's Playhouse Square. In short, he has transformed our community. Tonight, he will speak on his interest in design, preservation, tradition, and globalism in a talk entitled, "Okay, so you've always wanted to be an architect?" Please join me in welcoming Peter Van Dijk.
Thanks, Ann. It's a real delight to be here. And I knew Richard Campen, wonderful person. We talked often and went on some of his tours, and it was a pleasure to meet the Baker family tonight, too. You can imagine why I picked the title of this talk, because it's something that happens to me all the time, and to my colleagues, where somebody will saddle up to you and kind of confess, you know, I always wanted to be an architect. And it makes me smile because it happens so often. Usually I'll say, well, what happened? And they say, well, I didn't think I was good enough in math, you know, to do that. And I say, oh, that's a shame. We must have lost a lot of good potential architects, because I had a lot of math, but I never used that calculus or so. So maybe solid geometry. It gives you, at least it's a three-dimensional subject that gives you some visualization. But more important would be physics. Physics covers all the forces and things of nature that we have to deal with when we're designing buildings. So anyway, I hope we didn't lose too much talent by scaring them off with math. But there's a lot more interest these days about architecture. At least in the years that I've been in Cleveland, I've seen tremendous interest grow, and I think a lot of it has to do, there's more reporting about architecture. We have Steve Litt, of course, done a good job at least making people aware of what's going on and now and then giving his opinions. Sometimes I don't agree with those, but he's always been very kind to me in terms of favorable reviews. But the thing is that architects, they must have a tremendous status these days. I mean, you hear architects all the time. They're always talking about architect this and architect that, but the thing is they're not talking about us. They're talking about the architect of the peace plan, or the architect of the recovery plan, of the economic transformation plan. In fact, just a week ago, my eye caught this newspaper headline, "Winning Architects Use Piecemeal Strategies." What's that? It was about the 2 World Series teams and how their managers had put together their teams, you see. And, right now there's a commercial on television from Denny's restaurants that says you can be your own omelet architect. So, man, we are busy, you know. The thing, though, is that I'd still like to see more architects being asked to sit at the table of the elected, you know, where decisions are made that vitally affect our community's interests. But we're getting there, I think so. I've been an architect now for a little more than 50 years. I got my first license in 1959 in Michigan, and shortly after came to Cleveland. I'm working now almost all that time for, as you said, Westlake Reed Laskowski. I haven't been a partner there for 11 years, but it's a firm that was founded in 1905 by Abram Garfield, who was a son of President Garfield, so he must have had a little leg up, you know, in starting a firm. A very fine architect, known mainly, I think, for many beautiful homes in Bracknell, but also in this area. I know that the Historical Society, I mean the Cleveland Western Reserve Historical Society building is one of his, and coincidentally, he designed this building. So Abe, he's keeping an eye on me up there. But in those 50 years, it's been a privilege to work on a great variety of building types. That's what makes a practice interesting. Not just specializing in schools or hospitals or so, but it's that cross-fertilization that you can get by solving all kinds of problems, and so. And along the way, there have been some wonderful mentors, both in school and college, but also during this working experience. And several good clients, which is very important, really important, and interesting commissions. And I've been humbly fortunate to have been entrusted with the design of some important projects early enough to make a difference in your professional life. This doesn't happen anymore these days, especially with globalization, that a young guy would get a nice, juicy project. But I love this profession, this job. It's creative, obviously, and it's very challenging, and it's not boring. Every job is different. Every client is different. Everybody's needs are different. It's a very interesting journey from the first phone call, if you're interested in being interviewed or considered for a job, to the final ribbon cutting. But it's not a smooth journey. Usually a lot of bumps in the roads and a lot of 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, and so, but you get there. And you just gotta understand that, and it makes it fun. But I love this job as more as an avocation also. It's just a fascinating history of architecture, man's achievements, and the biographies of the people themselves. It's these wonders of the world, from the vernacular to the icons. And it's very inspiring and definitely humbling. But it gives you a life of constant learning, going to see things, planning trips of stuff that you've never been to Borobudur yet, you need to get there someday, and just appreciating that, and that I'm never going to be bored, and so. But architecture, as you can know and imagine, it needs to be experienced in place. You have to go there. It's nice to see beautiful photographs in books. Those are just to whet your appetite, but to go see these great things, new and old. And especially over time, through the rhythm of the seasons and even through the rhythm of the day. It's the way light plays on architecture that is your main tool that you have. And buildings going into especially buildings that are interiors that are lit primarily by daylight, like any Gothic cathedral. It's just an amazing place. But go there at different times of the day, too. I think the Pantheon in Rome, for instance, that's one unique experience. This wonderful cylindrical building with a big dome with just one window in it, which is a big hole in the top, and the way that's illuminated during the day. I was, a Fulbright student in Rome. Anytime I was in that neighborhood, I'd pop into the Pantheon just to drink it all in, see, especially when there's a little rain, kind of mistily coming in there. So architecture is something you just have to go and do and enjoy. And therefore, it's an art that I like very much because its primary values are aesthetic. But it's our job, so this is a service profession. That's a big responsibility. This is not an opportunity to go on an ego trip or so. You may end up that way, but at least you have to solve a problem that you're given, just like all other professionals, whether they're lawyers, doctors, and what all. We're working with other people's money. They expect you not to leave them with a big headache, or be sorry that they even hired you. So, but we are an art. That's the part that we all love, but we're a lot different from many other arts. Obviously, we're a functional art, which I've referred to, but we're a social art. It's for people. People are going to be using this building. Some buildings, types that's more important than others. I think a school, a hospital, a home, the social art, it's very much a social art. Because the projects are usually so big, it's a complex art. And so you're not doing this alone. You're involving many disciplines, meaning that it also becomes a collaborative art, because you're working with a team. You got this little orchestra that's putting together people with certain specialties, people that are your associates in your office that are all contributing to this. And putting that together and getting that team to work together is different than just painting something beautiful. Obviously, it's an expensive art. We're dealing with millions, if not just thousands. And in order to get something realized, and it takes a long gestation period to get a building designed and constructed. And so becomes an art of compromise, that you just can't do what you had in mind completely, my way. See, there's always things that come along where you're over budget, you gotta make some choices of priorities, or somebody screws up and, oh my God, we gotta fix that quickly, or you have foundation conditions that weren't expected, any kind of thing. So, but compromise can be very good too. It can often make something leaner, tighter, more. This is all we need, and at least we got that part of it. So learning how to use compromise is part of what you do. A couple other things that I think are different about us is it's not an isolated art. We're very integrated into the community or the society. I mean, there it is, and it's going to be there for a long time, and it's just part of your life, not only yours, but all the other people. And then I guess the last thing is that architecture changes slowly. It's not fashion and whim. And it changes mainly through technical breakthroughs, which is obvious. The science of building, from starting with only being able to stack stones on top of each other to build a pyramid, to building stone columns with a short lintel span. You couldn't go very far because it would crack under its own weight. And that went for centuries. It wasn't just a few months before they came up with another idea. But the Greeks, too, they perfected that. Even though they didn't have a different, newer method of building, they just spent those centuries refining the beautiful proportions of Greek art. Somewhere along the line, somebody figured out how to build an arch, piling smaller stones on top of each other, holding them in place to some centering, keystone, and whoa, look at this, you get and go. And then if you did that three-dimensionally, you had a dome. That must have been a real tough one to come up with originally. How do you hold a dome up before all those things lock? And then they pointed the arch so that the thrust wasn't so broad outward, and you could build these Gothic cathedrals. And I think some of the most amazing things, when you think of the time, are the Gothic cathedrals, how cities competed with each other, all for the glory of God. This wasn't a space effort or anything, but to be able to build so high and so light without any steel or anything. So, but all of those changes came slowly. It started to speed up a little bit when we discovered wrought iron. Bridges in England were being built with wrought iron, and then steel, of course, made it better to go even further. It was stronger, and all that. You could build on top of each other. And that stopped until Otis came up with his elevator, and then that really changed the forms of buildings. So what I'm getting at is it's goes slowly. I think there's going to be major changes in the way buildings look now that we're far more responsible and conscious about saving our natural resources and going back to working with nature, and that our buildings themselves are going to be self-sustaining, producing their own energy, or at least not wasting all that energy. See. And it's still an art. But architecture is a living art. See, it can have a great influence on people. And this is both positive and negative. Architecture can do so much for you, make you feel so good, just enrich your life. But it can be terrible. Just some of the housing projects that we built after World War II, and especially in Eastern Europe, just gloomy, boring, just utilitarian buildings. So it deals with such a wide range of human endeavors, architecture does. They're people's hopes and aspirations. And I remember that when I advise young people. Often I'll get a call from somebody in Shaker Heights or so, say, my daughter is going to be graduating from Hathaway Brown next year, and she's thinking of going into architecture. And could she come down and talk to you about where she should go to school? And I'll always say, yeah, I love to do that. We're on a campaign to try and get the brightest people to come into our profession. So we haven't missed some of these people that were afraid of math or so. But, and I'll show them the office, and they love model. Oh, that's cool, making all these models, that kind of type of thing. And then we start sitting down to talk about why she's interested in architecture and where she should go to school. And I'll surprise them. I'll say, don't go to architecture school. Oops, you know, that's sort of a shock. I said, no, I mean, not yet. Get a good liberal arts education first. Go to a four-year college, major in history or English, especially English, philosophy, whatever you take, that in those 4 years you can get a wonderful, become an educated person, you see. And then you can, oh, and then by the way, while you're doing that, take whatever electives you have room for in the arts, especially take drawing. Develop your drawings. Drawing is really observing, seeing clearly things, and a way of thinking. But painting would be good, and the other arts would be great. So, and then if you could travel, and maybe if you can convince an architect in the summer to come work for him, even if you're just filing stuff or going out and holding at the end of a tape when they're measuring stuff on a construction site. Just that exposure is good. Then you go 3 years to a graduate school in architecture. You're a little bit behind the students that have been in architecture all the time, but you're entering at a much more mature level. And in the end, you have your master's degree in architecture, but you have your BA in English, and it's a 7-year thing, and it'll stand you in good stead the rest of your life. You're going to be a citizen in a community that has something to contribute because of your training as an architect. It's taught you a different way of looking at things. But if you can't convince people of that and explain that and understand their needs, you're just an architect nerd, you know, that which is fine. But you need to count. Maybe you will sit at that table of the elected if people think you can speak or whatever. So go that way. It hasn't succeeded often, but now and then it has, and I love it when it does. I didn't do that because that wasn't available, but I've regretted. And I know when my wife went to John Carroll in art history, I thought, God, I wish I'd taken all those courses, but lived along with her. Now, the key activity of an architect is designing. It's not the only activity. There's room in our firm or job for all kind of talents. Some people aren't necessarily creative talents, but they're very interested in the technical part of it, or are experts in other parts. But even just to get out of school, you're going to have to go through lots of design studio thing. And it's really the process of solving a problem. First of all, the process of really understanding what the problem is, doing research on it. This is going to be a hospital, or this is a church, what's their religion, that kind of stuff. And then this long struggle of exploring the possibilities. I define design as exploring the possibilities, not just pulling something out of the air. It's trying the many alternative ideas until the best solution emerges. A lot of times a lot of those things end up in the wastebasket. Nowadays they just put the reject button on there. computer, and that idea is gone. But at least you can go back to the wastebasket and find those things. But eventually you get there. And it involves a lot of self-criticism, sort of this, it's a struggle. Open-minded experimentation, and you need to hold a lot of balls up in the air. You know, not solve things one piece at a time. Okay, I got that, and then when it's something, oh God, it's a mess. But so keep all your ideas. Anyway, intuition also plays a big part in designing. It's not just all rational thinking and solving things functionally only. See, building, there needs to be aesthetic richness. That might not have been on the list of needs of a client that gave you all the kind of rooms and things that they need. But a building needs to have a soul, and that's a big part of the design. How do we make this into really something wonderful? Here's an opportunity to do this. And so you have your grab bag of all these things that you work with space and light and color, texture, materials, sound even plays a role in how you feel on the building. And then how do you achieve dignity and delight and drama, or the procession of guiding people through a building, of a sequence of spaces and surprises, and even humor is all part of your tools that you use in having a kind of special result. And can the building have symbolic meaning is important. I mean, is it a church? Does it look like a church? This is an airport. Oh, wow, that must be a great theater or so. There's a lot of architects that I don't mean this in the wrong way, but they're all glass boxes, whether they're a church or whether they're a powerhouse or whether what. Beautifully done. But I like to do buildings that people can understand. I don't mean that at all in dumbing down. I mean, this has got to look like a church or so. But that buildings that have a human response to architecture, but also advancing the state of the art. You know, just a better building, maybe a better way of building, but a human response to architecture. And I admire the work of many architects whose work just has that. To me, I think Frank Lloyd Wright's work can be understood by almost everybody, you know, and it's great stuff over a long period of time. Just not too many people say, oh, I hate Frank Lloyd Wright's stuff. Alvar Aalto, one of my heroes, a Finnish architect, most of his work done in Finland, working with the natural materials there. Extremely modern buildings, but people get it. And they're very lasting appeal. They're not just a cliche. Eero Saarinen's work was very much like that. Eero's buildings were very symbolic. Of course, the St. Louis Arch looks like a gateway, but the TWA terminal, and one of my favorite buildings is the John Deere headquarters in Moline, Illinois. Excuse me. They make farm equipment, which sits out in the field and gets rusty brown. So he used for the first time this Core-10 steel, weathering steel, having this rusty-looking building in combination with mirror glass, but again, very inventive thing. But the building said something. To me, the greatest architect of all was Lou Kahn. His buildings too, maybe a little harder to understand for the layman at first, but they have that lasting quality that's out there. They're going to be great ruins someday. I mean the way the baths of Caracalla are, you know, that are still wonderful things. Now, the thing we need most, though, is a great client. You know, that makes all the difference. You know, Luke Kahn actually described them as clients that know not what they want, but what they aspire to, which says it in too broad a sense. But I think first, clients that can clearly vet what their needs are, so they give you a good description of what they need you to solve, going back to just your service profession thing, so that you have all the pieces to your jigsaw puzzle, not go halfway through a design, oh, I forgot another 2 bedrooms or whatever it would be, you see. So, but the best clients, though, are those who sincerely want to do the right thing, more than just for themselves, but that show a generosity to others. And by that I mean people that realize that this building is going to be there for a long time. It's not for me only. It's what our forefathers did here in Cleveland. A lot of the things they left us were just amazing things that we, for generations, have been enjoying. Bobby and I lived in a house in Cleveland Heights that was built in the early 1920s, and I think we were the 5th owner. And I often thought, this is a good house. I mean, I wouldn't design a French chateau house today, but I could see what a neat place it's been to raise your family and how other families must have felt that. In fact, there are 2 families that own that house since that time. But something that over time can be enjoyed by more than just the original commissioner. Now, we are all influenced as architects, and everybody, from your past, who some of your great teachers were that made the difference, and your experiences, where you lived, where you traveled, and what you've read, and so. And certainly architects have a lot of influences by other architects. We might not always admit it, but I bet you we do. We admire things and the work of others. And we all have a long list of heroes. Most of mine, I think, are more self-effacing, hard-working professionals. I mean, a guy like Eero Saarinen or Luke Kahn, he didn't have a PR agent or anything, or was out there with his shtick, just a hard-working guy with his sleeves rolled up. But some of the people on my list, Frank Lloyd Wright, although wait a minute, he's not self-effacing. No, but I mean, certainly one of the most influential architects to have come around in a long, long time. And then, of course, Alvar Aalto I mentioned, and Eero. I learned so much from Eero. He always kind of said he's not interested in being in the magazines, you know, for the latest cliche, but he's more interested in being in the history books someday, that kind of thing. But fabulous guy. Luke Kahn, who was one of my professors at MIT, I just learned so much from him, or been influenced by the timelessness of his work. Bucky Fuller was a professor of mine also, totally different thing, but working with him or having him as a prof, he should have had a Nobel Prize. He coined the whole phrase, spaceship Earth. One of the first people that started realizing, hey, this is all we've got, don't screw it up. And theoretically, it was trying to get the most out of the least. That was sort of a theoretical exercise. That's his geodesic dome stuff and so. But a few others that you may not know. Kenzo Tange, Japanese architect. All these people are dead now, but Tange was, his work, very, very modern, and yet it was Japanese, which is hard to do nowadays. How do you catch the spirit of a country or a culture in a very modern way. His buildings at the Olympics in 1980 are an example to look up. But today, I think the greatest architect is Santiago Calatrava in terms of a genius. And he's a structural engineer and architect. His work is so beautiful. Now, luckily these guys have computers to help them figure out these complex shapes. But there's many, many others on my list in history and from today. I mean, old Palladio, man, you'll be my friend forever. But I'm also very influenced by my Dutch roots. I know a lot about Dutch design, and it has a pragmatic aesthetic. There's no nonsense. A lot of European work is that, but especially Holland's very imaginative. I mean, I'm saying no nonsense, but it's also not boring or just functional. It's very imaginative and especially very humane. The main tradition of work in Holland has been for architects is to design housing. It's always a problem. It's such a dense country, and it's the law ever since 1903 that you have to have decent housing for everybody. So many of them specialize in that. They are also very responsible custodians of the land. Now, they don't have much land, and half of it they made themselves, from capturing it from the sea. So the country is a model for global sustainable development. And there's a communal ethic rather than an individual one, It's not just doing anything you want because that's mine, you see. But it's not communism either. It's a very capitalistic country. And especially, there's an openness for new ideas, not shackled by nostalgia. Ooh, I mean, that's what's holding us back here and all. Other influences, a couple of others. Vernacular architecture. That's the architecture without architects. There's the title of a book by Bernard Rudowski called that, and I think along with it went a show at the Museum of Modern Art. But it's the variety of indigenous, humble buildings that you see everywhere in the world that were designed the way and built before people had today's technology where you can do anything you want now. You see, whether it makes any sense or not. Examples such as, the hill towns of Italy or Southern Europe, alpine communities, African villages, mud brick cities in Yemen, the different American barns in different parts of the country, how the barns in New England are different from the barns on the West Coast and thing. The houses of America in the past, the New England salt box to the southern mansion to the houses of the Southwest with their thicker walls, or adobe, or the Northwest houses where you could leave your windows open because you had long overhangs and it was mild weather, but the rain didn't come in. All the different forms that were developed over generations of experimentation with problem solving by people who identified in an inventive way with their own location and their own time and the conditions at hand using local materials. See, they were always working with nature, and that's all they had. They didn't have air conditioning and heating, and so they did the best they could in inventive ways, and that's what gave them their forms, and that differs in all over the country. And they're so intimately related to their environment, which is a lesson we need to come back to, and we're getting that. But heck, they were doing that. Where'd we go? the result is usually very instructive, especially for today, as I said. They are the original green architects. They were using nature and their materials and not wasteful. And to me, there's a beauty in that. It's in that innocence and the honesty and the impersonal, natural character of their forms. It's not fashion or whims. You see, it's a good thing to strive for. In fact, they're so hard to improve upon because they serve their purpose so well. But this has come from evolution, I think. And they're so right. You know, it's as if they just grew there. Giorgio Vasari, his name popped up in the Montebello show yesterday as the author of a book. You know, he wrote The Lives of the Artists or so, but he was an art historian and architect. He described a building. I don't think he was talking about an Italian hill town, probably the Villa Farnese or so, but he said, non murato, ma veramente nato. That means not built, but born. See? Non murato, ma veramente nato. I think that's a terrific result to strive for, you know, that your building is just so right. See? While I'm talking about vernacular, I slip in here regionalism, because regionalism is a word that we talk about, and in architecture, it's the vernacular architecture or the forms and customs of a region, and that used to be that you could identify pretty well where you were by the type of architecture. But we've been losing that already for a long time, and hopefully with globalism we don't lose it any faster. But through less isolation, worldwide publications and everything, and the ability to do anything you want, appropriate or not. You know, you don't have to build with nature, or you didn't have to for a while now, because technology lets you do anything. I mean, you can build a glass house in Alaska and heat it like mad, and you can build the same house in Saudi Arabia and cool it, and neither may be appropriate, but you can just misapply novel ideas and cliches, and they're spread all over the place, and everything's starting to look the same. The other inspiration to me is shapes in industry, I mean, even steel plants or harbors or refineries, and bridges especially. Those gestures are sometimes so inspiring, you know, good bridges, not too clunky. Although I kind of like in Cleveland, we have a collection of all kind of bridges. Some of them are so ugly they're great, you know. They are beautiful things. I mean, and yet my favorites are ships, even down through history, from the Greek, what is it? Taraman, one of those wonderful Greek warships they had, all the way to today. I'm talking about the ordinary boats, not necessarily the fancy cruise liners, you know, which are glitzy hotels that float around taking you from island to island. But look at these oar boats that silently glide in and out of the harbor, you know, these dumb Tonka toys that are there, just such natural, gutsy things. And my favorite form is the American modern aircraft carrier. Just as a shape, look at one of those things. That side elevation, all those cantilevers that reach out to you, cantilevers on cantilevers, that canted deck, that sort of asymmetrical plan, the conning tower on one side, those are gorgeous forms. I'm not for the military-industrial complex here, but it just as something that our taxpayers have paid for. Those are beautiful buildings. they're just an inspiration to me as I see that in building. You see, then there's the subject of originality and innovation. You hear about that. Architects are always sort of under this kind of pressure of being original. You got to come up with your own idea. You can't copy somebody else's thing. And to me, originality is not so important, especially if it's just to be different. Innovation, yeah. I think innovation, if that means inventing things that advance the science of building, or an invention that makes it a better building, I'm all for that. But just to be different, Mies van der Rohe, he says, I don't want to be interesting. I want to be good, And he's right. You see, it's actually harder to be good than to be original. It's pretty easy to be original, just come up with some crazy idea. See? But I know in my work, I'm more interested in making lasting quality, and maybe sometimes innovative. Actually, there's a wonderful phrase that I should pin up: endless originality has been the curse of modernism. Speaking of modernism and modern, modern is not a style, Modern is a frame of mind, It's a way of thinking about the world. It's an attitude, an optimism, that embraces the present, using today's technology and today's means to improve life. It's real. It's not fake. It moves forward. It's always been there. All the great architecture throughout history that's been in the history books, and so that was the most modern thing people could do at the time, the most up-to-date, the most clear, honest expression of the technology and life of the time. See, I guess modernism probably defines a short period in there. But modern is not dead. It just keeps on going, and it's always been there. There's avant-garde, which we're all interested in, especially today with instant communication and so much stuff going on in the world that's amazing. We are all very interested in the avant-garde. What are the architects coming up with these days? What's going on? It's great opportunities have come about. Major projects in China or the Middle East, and even in our country, that are being done by some fabulous architects. And so I feel that all in all, a lot of it is very good and amazing stuff, and you envy them. I wish I had a job to do something like that. However, now and then I get a bit skeptical about, and sometimes actually even miss the idealism of the earlier avant-garde. And at times I think it's just self-indulgence. And this is fed by this media hype of the Bilbao Effect. Now, I haven't been to Bilbao, and I bet you I'd like that building. I've seen photographs of it. But it's become the slogan, the Bilbao Effect. That's going to turn your whole town around, and put you back and thing. It's this frantic search for drop-dead forms and just facadism, making an interesting facade on something. And one of the English architects, I forget his name, he called it handbag architecture. It's just great, but it's that wow factor. Well, maybe I love it if somebody walks into one of my buildings and says, "Wow, this is kind of nice," But I mean, to have to go for that wow factor all the time, it's having to make everything so special, extraordinary, or unique. Everyone is expected to be genius, I mean, in Italy, it's okay, it's molti italiani si credono di essere geni soltanto perché sono italiani. You know, Harvey, every Italian thinks he's a genius just because he's Italian, but that's okay. But to me, it's a dangerous effect on architecture students, Concentrate on being good first, and don't worry about the Bilbao effect. And so I'm going to complain about something here now. And we architects all have this big gripe, and that's our working environment. All professions are expected to be as up-to-date as possible. Even our colleagues in the allied arts are. Your doctor better be up-to-date, etc. And yet, many architects, almost all architects along the way, they're held back a lot. Don't make it too modern, Actually, make it look traditional. Architectural review boards are there that you can't even build a modern building or house in many areas, especially suburban America has got a thing about that. And we work in an environment where there's much confusion about taste and what's beautiful. A lot of plastic plants and fake wood formica, and you can make anything fake out of formica these days. And our country is a formless sprawl. Ohio is in the business of sprawl. Just keep on extending all that stuff out there. And there's a real blindness and callousness to ugliness. People don't see it anymore. I mean, we're festooned with telephone wires and stuff all over the place. You don't see that in other civilized countries. That's all underground. I mean, come on. And it just seems that we have lost our natural sense of beauty and appropriateness in so many ways. And I think it comes from the loss of art education and art in schools, and it's going to get worse, especially now. There's no money for that stuff. And as a result, advertising has taken over the role of telling us what's beautiful, that all this hype. It's just a lot of fake tradition. And, how about the oxymoron, authentic reproduction? Everything is a pastiche of nostalgia for the past. You see, there's a fantasy land and theme parks and Lunacy Village, Legacy Village. And this sort of Disneyfication of America, come on. Tradition is not a cosmetic. It's a culture, It's a continuing growth of our culture over time. This is not freezing history, but enhancing history's flow. We can derive inspiration from the past, not imitation. Now, I'll tell you about the past, and that's preservation, which I've been involved in a lot, and I didn't used to even think about it when I was growing up as an architect and early practice. You were doing your own modern buildings, but coming to Cleveland, I realized that we have inherited many magnificent buildings from our Cleveland forefathers, proud, wise citizens who gave us things of real quality and value and gave it back to the city in which they made their fortunes. Not only individual buildings, but also groups of buildings of graceful design, noble materials, and marvelous interior spaces, incorporating and collaborating with all the allied arts and the crafts. Some of these buildings are just such jewels. Among them are the 5 great banks we have, the Huntington Bank, the Society Bank downtown, the Federal Reserve Bank, the Cleveland Trust Rotunda, which has sort of been mothballed for a long time, and the original National City Bank, but also public buildings, our courthouses and city halls and office buildings, theaters, museums, churches, beautiful homes and parks, and actually whole neighborhoods that were done here in the past. Cleveland was a wealthy town, and they had generous people that gave those things back to us. We were also envied for innovative examples and ideas of urban planning, starting with our 1903 group plan, which gave such dignity and orderly form to a downtown. It was actually the first application of the City Beautiful movement, which was featured in the Chicago World's Fair 10 years earlier, trying to show that America could be, was now a grown-up country. So, and then there's a collection of arcades and passageways. Those fascinate me because that's unique to Cleveland. Only, I think, Providence, Rhode Island has an arcade. But that is such a civilized amenity for a northern city with a sometimes hostile climate. See, I have a little gripe with I.M. Pei, who I admire very much as an architect. But back in the 50s, he was the darling of urban renewal projects. He was the architect that did urban renewal projects in Chicago, Philadelphia, all over the place. And the last one was Cleveland. But it was the biggest. I think it was 32 acres. You had an opportunity to tear everything down and make a master plan for a big area of Cleveland. But by then, I think he was pulling stuff off the shelves from other projects, and he totally missed the idea that we already had in place a nice beginning of elegant network of arcades, and to apply that to Cleveland in a new design where you would have a major spine or something, whether you could travel through much of the town, just build on what we already had. See? Anyway, I still love Pei. He just did a fantastic museum, I think, in Dubai recently. Another Cleveland thing that was big was the Terminal Tower. And that was a big idea, to have a railroad station, an office building, a department store, and a hotel all in one megastructure, even also riddled with elegant passageways, right on Public Square, connecting with a rapid transit system to Shaker Square, one of the very first shopping centers and beautiful residential areas. And so even University Circle is a pretty special idea, placing so many cultural institutions in this park-like setting here. And in the 30s, we were leaders in public housing. The work of Joe Weinberg and Wally Tier and some of those guys was, people were looking at that from everywhere. All these features are the assets that are unique to Cleveland, and they contribute to what we are. And we as architects, first of all, our training should obligate us to help identify what are the valuable pieces to save, and then to help and show how to breathe new life into these buildings, to see if they can't be saved and be useful and valuable for us and future generations to enjoy. And doing this, though, with finesse, not heavy-handedly to fix a building. And it's not the place to show your ego, so you air condition this building or so. And now I can put a chrome-plated duct in there that says this is an expression of air conditioning or so. No, come on. You're fixing somebody else's work. I think your reward might be 100 years from now, somebody will fix up one of your buildings. But our city's character and quality is the product of these layers of history. The dialogue between generations, and time is all part of this. We live in space and time. In some cities like Rome or Paris, you see time. I mean, you can read it. It's right there just by, you can see this has all these layers. So if we could save what's familiar and unique, especially on a college campus, that's where it really counts. Alumni come back every 10 years and then not 10 years and this and that. Whoa, and they've fixed up that building, but it's still the building. But these are the things that distinguish one city from another, so that they're not all the same. Other cities have their own wonderful things, but we should keep ours. It's like it's much more interesting and fulfilling to have friends of diverse ages, races, backgrounds, lifestyles, and so some are very handsome, some not, some are a lot of fun, some a little boring, but it's the same with buildings. They're not all the jewels, but it's just enriching. It's the same. And I'm not talking about nostalgia for the past here. No, I'm concerned with the future, with urban variety, enrichment, even messy vitality and complexity and contradiction. It doesn't all have to fit in. Realizing, though, that not every building can or should be saved. Buildings are originally and should be economic vessels. They have to have a use, they have to be justified. They can't all be saved as museum. And there, again, the architect should help with that, because preservation and reuse is the ultimate recycling. It's the best green thing you can do. I mean, why tear down and dump into a landfill something that embodies so much energy, materials, and money? See if you can't save it first. Fix it. If it wasn't insulated, insulate it. If it had single pane glass, put in thermopane glass. If it doesn't fit the program anymore, well, maybe it needs to have an addition on it. And so, but first try to, rather than just start on. I know there's a lot of ego in architects that say, I'd love to clear that site and do my thing. I mean, I'm really pissed about Cleveland State tearing down the best building on the campus. It was their student center, designed by Don Hisaka, who I think was the best modern architect we've had here. He did our Thwing addition, by the way, among many things. And there's a lot of reasons why I think that's a great building. But advocate for reuse, at least try. Now, I better get in a little globalism here. It's coming on strong. Everybody's speaking English. That's the link of lingua franca. And the world is becoming a global civilization. There's maybe more uniformity, hopefully not less uniqueness, because I just hope we can keep what's special about each place in global. Maybe we have better access to it, but that's important. Those people make the best wine. Those Dutch cheeses are terrific. You know, that tequila. I know one in Mexico, Tres Generaciones. You know, that's a great orchestra, a terrific museum. And so it's there. The good thing, too, is that Americans who have been so isolated in the past, hell, we don't even go to Canada, are now hopefully going to be more aware of what's going on. And I hope our legislators who go on these facts-finding boondoggles, you know, open their eyes and see that in some places are way ahead of us, you know, especially in infrastructure and just sort of being good custodians of their land and energy and things like that. The nice thing about, too, is that you can design projects for all over the world. If you're a good Cleveland architect, and you can work in China, you can do your design sketches here, you have fax them or email them off to Bombay or so, and they can do the working drawings at night and the engineering inputs, and so next morning it's on your desk and you look at them, make a few more comments and this and that. So your world is your oyster as far as having your office. But the negative part of that is that in Cleveland, an architect is vulnerable in competition from anybody everywhere. It's become pretty usual that when we're the short list for a project here, there are architects from Europe on the list also, or Japan. So it's more difficult for an architect in Cleveland to get a real juicy project for Cleveland, in Cleveland. especially if you're a young architect. And that's bad. I know I would never be able to get a Blossom Music Center commission today, certainly not at age 37. See, that's a shame, but it's a fact. But because we need to be able to nurture here great cadre of architects. They're here, they just need the opportunities to do that, and that's a little bit in conflict with that. I'm done. But to conclude, there are huge unresolved problems facing the world today, and they're going to get huger just through expanding populations and the depletion of natural resources. And so there's a lot to do. And there have been many wonderful things done and happening here and there, but still not enough. Not enough in the places that you daily experience. They're occasional. We need many more models of positive environments for everybody to see. Just example, you can't even show people a modern house because it doesn't exist hardly around here. Not enough places that we need more models. It's socially uplifting stuff, aesthetically compelling, and real satisfaction. And I'm optimistic about Cleveland because we do have very good architects here, and we've inherited so many good bones, all that stuff from our forefathers that was so good, and especially that our natural features are so unique here. This incredible lake, my God, and a river, and even the topography of our city with the heights and to it in the lower part. And we have a very, very good art and design school here in the Cleveland Institute of Art. We also now have a graduate school of architecture of Kent, which I think it's important to have architecture schools in urban cities. And we have opportunities. University Circle is almost great. There's so much good stuff there, but it's missing a few more things, important things. Like, there's no sin here at all. Everything is the best, the best museum, the best orchestra, there's 3 great hospitals, a big university, and so. But the big street life is up on Coventry. We need more 24/7. We need more housing here, and gotta keep an eye on it that it's good designs. Variety of housing, especially luxury housing. Bring that money back into Cleveland, have those people live here next to their museums, etc. But good things are happening, but there's still plenty of opportunities that we shouldn't let slip by. Bring the rapid transit to Mayfield and so. But I love my colleagues that I work with, all my architects. The camaraderie in this town is good. We're a small profession, so we stick together. I especially love the young ones who are so very committed to this city. They've come back to Cleveland, they live in the city, they've put sweat equity into their house, they may even bicycle to work. I just wish them all well and hope that they'll have many opportunities and success, because we need to believe that great things can yet be accomplished here, that architecture is an act of faith. So let's have the courage to create beauty. Thank you.